Hello everybody, I'm Jane Carroll. I'm a watercolorist, and I want to thank you for joining me in this watercolor workshop. This particular workshop doesn't require really any drawing skills, unless you want to count making circles that don't even have to be perfect circles, and no experience whatsoever in watercolor. For those of you who already know watercolor and have used them before, I think you'll have fun using them again. And for those of you who are new to watercolor, I think this is a great way to kind of jump in and see if you like them. The way I plan to offer the workshop will be in 3 parts. The first part will involve just taking a quick look at the materials you've gotten, and then setting up your workspace and setting up the materials. The second part will actually be the painting part, the creating part. And lastly, the third part will be using what you've created, those colorful tiles that you'll see soon, to make 1 or 2 really lovely note cards that you can send to people, and they will love them. I recommend that as you do this workshop, that you watch each segment entirely and don't try to paint or do anything along with it. After each segment, I'll have you put your video on pause, and I'll put up a little to-do list of the things that I'd like you to do. You go off and do those things, then come back ready for the next segment, so you can pace yourself. All right, here we go. So here's the painting we're going to use as our inspiration. It's by Kandinsky, and it's called Squares with Concentric Circles. And you look at it, you can notice just the variety of colors, the fact that the different circles are different widths within each other. Some of the circles stay within their little square, and some run right off the edge. Let's have some fun with this. Let's channel our inner Kandinsky. We'll use our creations to make a couple of really lovely note cards. So here are all the things you'll be using to do this project. Some of the things you got in your kit, and others are things you'll find around the house. The first thing to take a look at is this really nice piece of watercolor paper, about 7 by 10. And here's a tracer that you'll use later to trace the squares that you'll be painting. And the watercolor paper should not be confused with this other piece of paper that you got, which is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. And it's scored right down the middle here so that you can break it into 2 later, plus 2 envelopes. And next you got a paper plate with and 3 different paints, different watercolor paints, a blue, a magenta, and a yellow. And throughout the video, I sometimes call it magenta, sometimes call it pink, sometimes call it red, but it's this color right here. And the plate was promised to be non-permeable. It was supposed to be coated so that the paints wouldn't go through. So that did not happen, I realized. So I've included a little video clip on how to make the plate impermeable to the paint so that you'll just be able to mix colors on top of them. That comes later. But if you didn't want to use the plate and you just want to go with something else to mix paints on, if you had a white plate that you didn't mind using, it might get stained, so it has to be one you don't care much about, or any sort of plastic container, plastic tray, that would work as well. You can even use a glass pie plate with a piece of white paper underneath it. That would work beautifully. Paints won't soak through anything. So those are things you can do to remedy that situation of the faulty paper plate. You also have a number 10. It's called number 10 round brush. Mine's all stained blue. Yours is nice and white to start. and yours comes with a plastic sleeve on it, clear plastic sleeve that you'll want to remove. And when you do, you'll find that the paintbrush, the bristles are very stiff because they have sizing in them. So go over to the sink, run some water, and smush it under the water and get that sizing out so that it's nice and soft and usable. You have a pencil for yourself, and you have 3 different crayons, a silver, a gold, and a white, and they can be used if you'd like to create marks that will then resist the paint. So you'll be making, you can make designs on them with these crayons, and I'll show you some with that on there later. And just to remember that you need to make the lines with these crayons a bit on the broad side, because sometimes the paint can overpower the wax of the crayon and you don't get to see the lines. You can grab some paper towels, and then I've just torn them into sort of 6 or thirds or whatever, smaller pieces, because you just don't need big pieces. And I've even taken 2 full paper towels and folded and folded and folded them and smushed them into this kind of package, and then close it with a piece of tape or rubber band. And this can also be used just to get most of the paint off the brush before you go back in with another color, before you dip it in the water. So that's that. You have glue stick in your kit. You'll need some tape, either regular tape or masking tape. And grab a spoon, a tablespoon's good, out of the drawer, and that'll be used for pressing down on the tiles as you adhere them to the card later. Before you start too, you want to be sure to wash your hands if you have any lotion on them at all, because the oils on your hand and the watercolor do not mix very well. And before you start, in fact, at this point, part of your to-do will be to moisten the paints a little bit. They're hard, they're dry, which is fine, but to activate them, even now, just to take the spoon and just drop maybe 3 drops of water onto them, just to kind of get them activated. Not a big flood, just a few drops, and then it'll be much easier to use when you're painting later. So here comes a oops, sorry moment. When I put the kit together, I included a paper plate that was coated. Promised it wouldn't, soak in. Well, it does. And so if you use the plate without doing what we're going to do right now, it would quickly become very stained with the colors you'd use, and you wouldn't get the white palette behind it. So here's a quick fix. You take one of the glue sticks that you got in your kit and just cover the whole plate with it as much as you can. Let's see. And you can go up the sides a little bit. Get up the sides. And then, while it's still wet, take a piece of saran wrap, plastic wrap, and put it right in there. Try to get it as smooth as you can, kind of like you're making a pie crust here, actually, your bottom crust. So kind of get it in there and try to have as few bumps and wrinkles as you can, but whatever. There you go. Push it right in, right against the side, right up against the side that you glued. There's a lump of glue. Get rid of that. And it's pretty good. And nothing's going to soak through. And you can clean the palette of paint when you need to make new puddles. And then, much like a pie crust, get your pie crust scissors out and kind of cut away the extra plastic before you tape those pots of paint onto the edge there, onto the edge of the plate. Just get all this extra out of here. And that'll work fine. If you don't have plastic wrap, if you can find a plate, a dinner plate that you don't mind using, which might, that paints can be staining, so you might not get it out. If you have an old one, or maybe even a, I don't know, maybe even a clean pie plate you could use, so they wouldn't have the white of the bottom. But something that won't let the paint soak through. There you go. Sorry about that, but here's the fix. And ready to go. Here's how I arrange the workspace. I have the paper right in front of me, and I have the paints and water and brush to my right, and paper towels to my left. I'm right-handed, so you lefties might want to just flip it around. Here's your to-do list. So put your video on pause, go off and do these things, and then come back. So we're back and ready to create those tiles that you'll use for your finished product. And what I'll do is I'll show in this next part 2 a variety of pictures and videos to walk you through the steps of color mixing and puddle mixing and actually painting the tiles. And you'll start by first taking that tracer thing that you got in your kit and tracing 15 squares onto the watercolor paper. And then you'll see about mixing up puddles of paint that you'll be using and using the crayons to create marks, little resist marks if you wish. And then finally a demo of painting the tiles. It should be fun. And finally after that you'll see a little slideshow of some tiles that I've been painting over the last few days to give you some inspiration for colors and mixing and lines. And then lastly I'll post a to-do list of all of these steps, so you can pause your video and go do all these things and then come back for step 3. So here's a quick little review of mixing colors with the 3 that you were given, the yellow, the magenta, and the blue. If you want to get some oranges, you mix the yellow and the magenta. And these have a little bit more magenta than yellow. These have a little bit more yellow than magenta, but a nice array of orange. If you want to get greens, mix the yellow and the blue. These have a little bit more blue, these have a little bit more yellow. And if you want purples, mix the magenta and the blue, and you get a variety of purples. And then if you want to get some colors that are a little bit more muted or neutralized, you take those very same 3 colors that you've used, and it'll be a mix of all 3 somehow. So for instance, if you started with a purple, which is red and blue, your leftover is the yellow. So you take the purple, mix in just a little bit of yellow, and you can get these varieties of different purples. And if you did orange, started with orange, which is yellow and red, you need to put a little tiny bit of blue in there. And by just changing up the proportion of the different colors, you'll get this variety. And if you started with green, yellow, and blue, you're missing red. So put a little teeny bit of red in there and play around with the different proportions of colors, and you'll get some nice in-betweens. If you happen to start with a yellow, which is just a single color, you're going to have to add a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. And just play with that, mix that up on the palette and see what you get. If you started with magenta, which is the blue and the yellow, which is just plain old magenta, if you mix in a little bit of blue and a little bit of yellow, you'll get something in between. And if you started with the blue, you'll just mix in a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, and a little bit of the magenta and see what you get. And just get a huge variety of colors from just the 3 that you start with. So here's how to mix up a nice puddle of paint that you'll use and mix with the other puddles. I've already made the yellow and the pink, the magenta. And the first thing you do is take the spoon and just take some water in it and put about a puddle of water about the size of a nickel, no bigger than a quarter. And then taking the brush, which anytime you go into paint, don't go in with a dry brush. So you want to have it damp, wet. Call it a clean, thirsty brush. So you go in the water, but don't use it like that. Always take it and squeeze out as much water as you can back into the water container so that it's thirsty, but it's not dripping wet, because it'll just dilute the paint that you make. So you take the paint, the blue paint, and scrunch some into the brush and start putting it in the water. At this point, do not go back into the water for any reason because you'll just keep thinning it out and you want to make it thicker. So just keep going back in, smush it around. Hopefully the paint does not travel on the paper plate and smush in with the other colors yet. And then you try to get it to the consistency of like whole milk, maybe even half and half. Whole milk is better. And what you can do is, when you think you've got it, you can test it out, even using just a piece of copy paper. Just put it on there and it's like, okay, I think I'm just going to go a little bit thicker. Probably better to go thicker than thinner because you can always thin it easily, and it's a little trickier and more annoying to thicken it with new paint. So you're circling it around, and you think you've got it. I'm liking that, and that's with the other pink colors that I made. They seem to be about the same thickness. And then before you think you're done, there's a lot of good paint in that brush, which you don't want to just waste. So just take your fingers and squeeze it and get whatever you can of the color that you just made into the puddle. And that's that. And you put them as far apart as you can so they don't bother each other. So you have those 15 squares traced on your paper already with using the tracer, and you've created those puddles of hopefully milk or even half and half thickness to work with, and I've got those mixed up here. And the next thing you'll do is start with a clean, thirsty brush, which means the brush is sort of dried. You swish it around in the water, get all the air bubbles out of it, and then squeeze it pretty dry, so that you get the water drips out of it, and then the brush is just ready to take up paint. So here we go. We're gonna be like Kandinsky. So you want to keep the brush filled with paint. I've got 3 squares that I'd like to just play around with you, show what I do. One here and here, and I've already used the crayon resist on this one here, which is going to be a white crayon resist, and it'll be interesting to see how that comes out. You can barely see it. And here I've thrown some gold on there, so we'll see if that comes through. And you have to make the lines pretty broad, because if you don't, the paint just overpowers them and they don't show through. So here we go. I'm going to start with just using some straight colors right out of the puddles that you made. So I'll go into the pink, the magenta, and I'll just fill the brush. Don't be skimpy on it. And I'm just going to start to create a circle. Make sure you can see this. I'm going to just start, I'll start with the outside circle, but you don't have to. And depending on how hard I press down on the brush, the line will be thicker or thinner. When I start to run out, I don't try to make it work. Just go right back in, keep the brush nice and filled with paint. And then I come back to the top and come down. It's a little hard to make your brush go up, so I just like to pull down all the time, but you'll play with that. I'm going to switch colors right now, so I'll take one of my paper towels and squish as much color as I can out of there before I dip it in the water. Just preserves the water for a while longer. Clean that out. Start with a clean, thirsty brush again, so get most of the water out of it. And I'll go in with some yellow, and I'll fill it up. And I think I'll try to make a skinny line, and that will just hold it so it's almost point down. The brush is almost straight up and down. And just by barely touching it, you can get a thin line. Go thicker if you want. And if by chance you touch the red line, you'll see what'll happen. Ooh, and I'm just gonna leave it just like that. I might go back and fill it up a little bit. The yellow again. I'm gonna let it just do that. There. And now we're gonna take, while I've still got the yellow, I think I'll do the corners in yellow. So I'll just, that's very watercolory, kind of like that. Especially when it happens as an accident, a happy accident. Fill that up. I think I'm gonna do orange, so I'll show you how I mix the colors to the magenta and the yellow to make orange. Clean out the brush as much as I can. And what I do, especially if a color contains yellow, start with the yellow first, not the other color. So I'm gonna pull some yellow, let me clean the middle first. I've already got colors in there. Clean the middle out. I'm gonna pull some yellow out to the middle. I'll do the mixing stuff in the middle, so you can try to preserve those puddles of paint that you made as long as you can. I'm going to pull just a tiny bit of the second color out, bring that magenta over and see what I've got. Let's turn it on. I think I'll use this orange right here. Fill the brush up with it. And I'm going to make a medium width. And it already mixed. Well, how do you like that? Just go ahead and make the orange one. There. And just for fun, I'll use purple in the middle, which I'll do by mixing the magenta and the blue. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to get the yellow out of there. So I'll use a paper towel and just mop that up. And so now again, I'll just, ooh, look at that. I'll pull some thirsty brush, clean, pull some magenta out to the middle, just enough to kind of get the brush filled up, pull a teeny bit of the blue over, start mixing. Ooh, that's nice. So I'll just use it. And I'll fill in that middle circle. Using the tip of the brush now because it's kind of fine lines I'm trying to do. And there you have it. And just for fun, I'm going to take some of that purple and put it on purpose into the magenta that's still wet. And it'll, not wet enough. Usually it just kind of swirls around in there, but that's okay. Do that. And that's it for that one. And the second one, I've got the white crayon resist, and I'm going to do some using of the third color to get the more neutralized colors. So I think I'll take the purple that I made with the magenta and the blue and make it a little bit more. And if you start to run out with your circles, now you can just kind of make the, put a drop or two of water in and add to that magenta because I'm sort of running out. Just kind of fill it up again. Keep that puddle available. I'm going to pull some magenta out there. And you're going to pull some blue to make the purple. Get a nice purple. And then to get something neutralized, we'll use the third color, but just a little bit. So I'm going to try to pull a little yellow in there. Just bring it over. Just a little bit. See what happens. I can do a little bit more. It's just a little bit different. And I'll start with that, and I'll do the outside. I'm gonna make a thin outside circle. Oh, and you can see the resist. It's starting to run out, so I'll go back in, use a thirsty brush, use a full brush. It'll feel better that way. That one's done. Now, I think I'm gonna add more yellow and see what happens to this mix. So we got that. Pull in a little more yellow. So now I'll stay down here. The more I pull it, I've got enough blue, purple on my brush. But it's brown. I'll make it thick. Go back in, run it out. So this was the magenta and the blue making purple, and then adding yellow. I don't know what I'll do next. I think I'm going to go with some orange. So get rid of this brownish purple in the brush. The palette's kind of a mess in there, so clean it as you go. I'm going to save this, so save anything that's pure. And if those puddles ever become just all messed up and polluted, just blot them up and make some new puddles. Get rid of this brown as much as I like it. I say orange, so I'm going to use the magenta and the yellow again. Let's see, so I'll pull the magenta into the middle, pull some nice orange into the middle, and some yellow. And I like it right over here, it's pretty nice. I just do another circle. I'll just make it a little bit pinker by the same puddle, but just pull some more pink into it. And a little bit red or orange. And the resist is doing its job. And I think I'll just sort of decide on the moment, I think I'll go with blue on the outside in the corners. So I've got to get rid of what's on my brush. And blue, I'm going to just go in straight. brush around those corners. You can go right outside the lines because we'll be cutting them, and it'll be nice and neat. You don't have to worry about that. Some of these lines these colors are dark over the lines, and when you go to cut them out carefully, you'll realize you have lost your guidelines to cut on. So just take out the tracer again and give yourself some new lines for cutting, because I can tell I'll have a hard time seeing those pencil lines when I'm trying to cut. So I'm liking those so far. Here comes the gold crayon resist. And I'm thinking, what would I like it to be? I don't know. I think I'll go with, yellow won't show up against gold that well, so I'm going to go with something different. I'm going to go with blues and purples to do this last one. So I think I'll go right in with the blue before I mix it up. And I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to make it large. Circle, go back, keep it full. If it starts to get dry, go back and you can see it's already overpowering the gold. Okay, now I'm going to try some purple. So get rid of this orange in the middle. Start with some green, magenta, and blue. I can keep the blue that's on there. Pull some blue out. Pull some magenta over. As it's coming over, I decide if I little by little and see what it. Ooh, that's nice. So here it comes. I make a thicker purple. But it's not seeming that purple, so I want to just go right in and throw some magenta in there to get it more purpley for myself. Subtle purple. And I think I'll just keep adding a little bit more magenta as I go. You can just play around with what might be fun. Just kind of dry it up. Ooh, that's nice. Everything in watercolor will dry about 30% lighter than what you put it on with. So if you're painting and you're thinking, oh, this is kind of a watery mix, it's kind of light and it looks a little wimpy, if you let it dry, it's going to look wimpier. So that's the beauty of using the thicker paint. The darker paint, when it comes out darker, it'll dry so you can see it. I'm liking that. I'll just keep that, and then what do I do for the corners? I'm going to use some orange because it's sort of already mixed up on my plate. I'll just go right in with it. So I've already got yellow down here. The pink is kind of already there. I'll just use what's there. Go in, hit that. And there you've seen laying on the circles, keep the brush full, clean the palette when you need to, when it gets kind of too messed up, refill the puddles as you need to, start all over with fresh puddles if they get really totally unusable as a single color, and just play, you know, and try mixing them on the palette. So don't mix them on the palette and just see what happens. Just let them dry completely. So these are still very wet and I need to just let them dry. So have some fun with this. And if you absolutely can't stand waiting for it to dry, it's just going to take too long, you can use a hairdryer, but you have to promise yourself that you will not use the hairdryer when the paint is still wet, or it'll just push the pigment right into the paper and you'll lose what you did. What you need to do is wait until the shine is off the paper. So hold your watercolor paper up to the light, look at what you painted, and if it's still shiny, you can't use the hairdryer yet. If it becomes like a matte color and there's no shine, you can use a hairdryer and you can dry it a lot more quickly. Here's your to-do list. Put your video on pause, go forth and create, and then come back. So now let's put all this together into a card. Take the piece of cardstock that you have, it's scored down the middle, so just fold it back and forth until you get two pieces. And then it has a little fold line there for you as well, so fold it. And then you're going to have all of the squares cut out very carefully along the lines that you drew. And want to arrange them into some 2x3 design that you like. So I've picked 6 that I like, and I've decided I kind of like this arrangement right here. Kind of moved them around till I got what I liked. That's what I like. So I'll save that. I'm going to just move that off, keeping what I decided, and then take the card, the first card, determine what the front of it is. Obviously, it's here. So I'm going to glue right here. And I want to draw some guidelines that will help me when it comes to the gluing part. So I take a straight edge. I'm just going to use the envelope that came with it. And I'm going to take it and put it about a ½ inch, maybe a little bit less from the top. And just eyeball it, get it as straight as you can. And draw a line there. You can erase that later if it shows up. And now take the 6 cards that you picked, keep your design, and put them in there really tight, right against each other. That's about right. I'm going to be fussy about putting it right up against that line. Next one as well. Next one. You don't really even need to do the bottom because they'll just follow along once they get the top row right. And there's no, I need to make sure there's evenly spaced between the left and the right. They obviously are not. So I'll shift them around until I get the same amount of space on one side as the other. And keep using the guidelines on the top. And let's see how that looks. I'm going to move it over a little bit to the right. Yeah, that works for me. It's equal on left and right. Get this first one lined up really nicely. And take the pencil and draw this little corner mark for yourself. Once you get that first square lined up, the rest will follow. So now you're ready to glue. You can keep the design you chose. Put them out of the way. And just glue them down one at a time, starting with this upper left. A lot of glue. And then use the tablespoon, the back of the tablespoon, to help press it into place. So line it right up there. Press it down. Second one. And then just do the rest. Fill it in with the 6 that you chose. And then pick another 6 that you like and make another card. And be thinking about who you're going to write to on the beautiful card that you made. I guarantee the recipient will love it. So there you have it. Okay, say, finish this one up. Make another one. If you like, just sign it and send it to somebody. Here's your last to-do list. Put your video on pause, go find your scissors and glue stick, go get busy, and then come back. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me in this painting class. I hope you had fun. I had fun, and I hope that next year, when we have our Arts and Spirituality retreat, we can paint together in person.